Hey everybody, Aaron with Sage Dynamics, and this is my review of the Aimpoint Duty RDS. Before we get into the review, of course, some of you might be surprised because maybe you didn't catch it in the video I put up about the topic, but I'm still periodically putting out YouTube videos, even though the majority, overwhelming majority, even though I hate that term, has gone to Patreon. So Patreons have already seen this video for a couple weeks ago. I'm releasing it here, and I will occasionally release videos. If you want to get the latest content and exclusive content that's never going to be on the YouTube channel, of course, come on over to Patreon, where we've got a growing audience and some more intelligent conversation. Otherwise, just stand by, and you'll see the occasional video still pop up on the YouTube channel until YouTube completely deplatforms all firearm content, which is probably going to happen. Without further ado, here's a review of the Aimpoint Duty RDS. So many years ago, I needed a rifle optic for a second rifle. It was going to be a duty rifle, something I used both for training and for duty purposes. Didn't have a whole lot of money, but Aimpoint made the Aimpoint Pro, the patrol rifle optic. And at the time, this was quite some time ago, there weren't a lot of quality options at that price point, and especially for the battery life, the features that I was going to get from an Aimpoint. I had a T2, couldn't really afford another one. So I picked up an Aimpoint Pro, and I ended up later on buying two more. So up until recently, I had 3 of them. And it was a high quality optic that provided exactly what I needed, nothing that I didn't need, the no frills option, kind of like the budget version, but it still had the great durability. And that first one got knocked around quite a bit. That thing ended up with a lot of rounds underneath it on 2 different rifles. In fact, it lasted through one rifle and on to the second. And I was always happy that there was a company like Aimpoint that would provide that quality of an optic at that price point. And that was huge, especially back then. Today, there are more options for quality optics in the same price range. And the Pro, while being a very good optic, don't get me wrong, I always had a few gripes about it. The adjustments, the available brightness settings, the maximum brightness, and the overall size footprint. And the weight didn't really bother me because, let's be honest, it doesn't weigh that much. But the other things were factors, and as time went on, it started to really show its age. So Aimpoint has kind of brought out a replacement, if you will, for the Pro with the Duty RDS. We're getting a lot of the same features that we get from the current generation of the T2, the Micro, without the additional costs, and also arguably some features that are improvements upon what is available on the T2. Of course, I have a 2 MOA dot on this. I've got a 30,000 hour of battery life, even in constant on if you're leaving it on setting 7. It has an off position, of course, 4 night vision compatible settings and 6 daylight settings. The weight is what you'd expect, just under 4 ounces for the sight only, submersible to 25 meters. And it has the clarity that we've come to know and love from Aimpoint, which we'll talk more about as we get in the video. The one thing that is glaringly obvious about this optic as soon as you purchase it is different. The controls have finally been moved to the left side of the body, which I think they should always been there. I am a left-handed guy, but I shoot rifles right-handed, and it's always nice to be able to come in and just make my adjustment without taking my controlling hand off the gun. Not a big deal to come out here and do this stuff, but it is nice to have the option to use your support side hand, or what for the majority of shooters is going to be the support side hand. Again, I am left-handed, but I shoot rifle right-handed, so I'm a right-hander when it comes to rifle type stuff, and I live in a right-handed world even when I'm left-handed. So having the controls on that side always made a lot of sense to me. Some people put them up top, which makes a lot of sense. Having to go with what's mostly going to be most shooters' support side hand, kind of a sticking point for me. Not a big deal, but it's something that, like, hey, if you can make it this way, why not make it this way? The adjustments are a departure from what we got with the T2, and even though it's not a comparison, it is worth mentioning because it is a departure from what they're used to. Instead of that 2-slot horn system that we could use little caps or tools for, now we just use a Torx, which initially I was like, whoa, those are unprotected, but they're waterproof sealed. I'm sure they're shock isolated, and throughout the review process, they were exposed to everything I was going to be doing to the optic. Another thing that is definitely worth mentioning is the body size, the body height, and this is something I don't think a lot of people are taking into account, but they're starting to. Mount companies are already starting to address it. This body, when on a mount, is going to sit almost a ½ an inch higher than what you're going to get from like a T2 or a Comp M5. That is something that has to be taken into consideration when choosing your mount height, because if I'm running it, like for example, I'm running it on this this Geisley lower 1/3, it's now sitting up in the passive aiming for night vision range. Not quite as high, but it's definitely up there. So you can take your traditional lower height or your lower 1/3, that's accounting for the optic or the center line height of what you'd have with the T2. So yes, you can run this optic on T2 mounts. However, it's going to sit almost ½ an inch higher. So that's, for some people, they like to get really down in below the rifle. Nasal congestion range, that's fine. I'm more of a, let's try to get my head up as well and as natural as possible. So I appreciate this optic for that, because I run it on a lower 1/3 and it puts in a really comfortable neck position for shooting. Window size, very comparable to the T2. Getting into the first 500 rounds of just get to know you all daytime shooting, getting it zeroed. The adjustments are clean. Torx is a lot easier to keep up with. Also, now the tool that I use for my Acro P2 works on my Duty RDS. I hope the next generation of Aimpoint Micro, like if they do a T3 or whatever, they get away from that horn cap. I'm sure there's a technical term for it, and somebody will put it in the comment section. The two holes that are on the cap little thing, the little nipples. I hope they get away from that and use this same style of adjustment, because it's smooth, breezy, easy, whatever you want to call it. And it's much easier to, I mean, to make the adjustments. If you don't have a prong tool, which it comes with one, but I don't keep up with those things, then I have to use the cap, and that starts to make my hands cramp after a little while. So it's just me complaining about the little things. The adjustments are nice. The button adjustments for brightness settings are excellent. So in that first 500 rounds, I'm really starting to appreciate the new features. Now for the review, I mounted it on my Sons of Liberty 11.5. This is their Lone Star edition, which, I mean, honestly is just a roll mark, no significant difference there. This is a known quantity for me, that I know this to be an excellent and an accurate and a dependable rifle. So for the review process, it was going to be great. And of course I threw it on this Geisley mount because it's what I had. I didn't really seek out any specific mount to put it on, but I know Geisley, the super precision mounts, are durable and they can handle what I'm going to do to the optic. After that first 500 rounds, we get to the burn down, which is 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if that accelerated rate of fire will identify any issues that I wouldn't notice with the same round count over a much longer period of time. So 4 to 5 minutes versus 4 to 5 hours, days, weeks, months, years. You've heard the spiel before. Now, when it comes to red dots, especially for burn downs, be it handgun or rifle, what I'm really looking for, because I mean, the recoil is the recoil, whatever. There's no tolerance stacking there necessarily, especially for 5.56 223. I'm looking to see if as the gun heats up, I start to notice any fading or flickering. Even though it is sitting somewhat above one of the hardest parts on the gun in the cycle of fire, I've still seen cheaper optics get affected by a high round count. And 500 rounds is outside the realm of what I would consider to be realistic shooting for the majority of shooters. I mean, you think about, that's a lot of ammunition in a very short period of time. Not good on the gun either, but I'm doing it so you don't have to. So 500 rounds, what I'm really looking for, I mean, if anything happens, is to see if that heat is going to affect the quality, the clarity of the sight picture, or if the dot is going to start to experience any kind of electronic failures or issues, flickering or issues because of the heat. Here's your burn down. Ooh, that's warm. First to last round, no issues. Wasn't really expecting any. It is an Aimpoint, but you never know, right? This is a new body style for them. It's a new optic for them. I don't know how many changes they've made in the actual internal electronics coming over from the Pro or coming over from the T2. So, you know, sometimes the consumer market identifies problems that the manufacturer did not account for. That happens quite a bit because engineers just don't always account for everything that's going to be done to their product. And if enough people do it, they're like, oh, we got to fix that. Happy to say 500 round burn down, no issues. Then I started using it for, I mean, it's in the name, Duty RDS. So I think about, okay, what kind of uses can we expect? Obviously, just your general carbine, general rifle practice, you know, working close intermediate distances, shooting out there, reaching out there. Dot quality is the excellent, consistent clarity you're going to expect from Aimpoint. Glass quality for daylight transmission has been excellent. There is a slightly noticeable notch filter, but it's not nearly the same level of notch filter that a lot of people complain about with other optics. It's barely noticeable. You really have to be looking in the very right light conditions to really notice it. But if you're aiming both eyes open, daylight or indoors, you're not going to notice it like the Optic is very dark and the non-dominant eye isn't. That's definitely not something I had issue with. I was going to be doing a lot of night shooting, so I figured I'd bring this rifle and put it through its paces. Low light is where you start to really set optics apart from each other, because sometimes, like I said, that light transmission that's blocked in lower lighting conditions, you wouldn't notice it during the day because it's the sun. But at night, especially if you're not pushing a high quality weapon light, you can really start to lose positive identification at distances with the available light that you have. Now, the light I was using for the review process, of course, I'm using a mod light with the OKW head, which provides a great deal of candela. But I also just mess with it in failing light conditions, twilight, if you will, light conditions where you wouldn't necessarily need the light for positive identification. And I didn't really notice any issues. Dot brightness was excellent for those conditions. And shooting it in actual low light, realistic and very, very dark low light conditions, I was very happy with the overall performance. The dot quality is good. I don't notice the refresh rate. Transitioning from target to target, I don't get any flicker or stuttering or anything like that. It's kind of what I'd expect from an Aimpoint, even though this is kind of like the more budget version of the Aimpoint's offer. Night vision, I know people are gonna ask. Yeah, I shot a lot of night vision with it. Now, passive aiming is more of a niche skill. It's something that I think every rifle should be capable of, because there may be times where you don't want to or shouldn't use your visible laser. If you're worried about the bad guy having night vision, that's going to lead him right back to you. Or, honestly, if you have a good optic on a good mount where it's comfortable to shoot with passive aiming, you don't really need a laser. And this is something that is not looked upon favorably by some of the monocle crowd when it comes to night vision. But if you've got a monocular and you've got a good rifle and a high mount, you can just passive aim all day long. It's just like shooting during the daytime, admittedly with extra steps. It's no different than shooting a red dot handgun under night vision. So even though I do prefer to have a laser, like I'm running an NGAL on this rifle and it's an awesome little guy, very pricey though. So even if I was using a more budget option laser, passive aiming is a skill I should practice. If I'm going to do night vision shooting, I should be able to, you know, at least be familiar with all these different varying techniques and concepts and principles. And passive aiming is one of those things that I might want to do or might need to do based on the situation. I went through the night vision settings, but I'll be honest with you, I don't use them. I checked them out for the video purpose, of course, but for me, I keep my dot on a brightness setting that's going to be usable in all conditions. My main reason for doing that, I think I've explained this, of course, in other videos, is what if I have to suddenly transition from night vision to white light? I don't want to also have to be making adjustments on my brightness, although now with the adjustments on the left side of the gun, it would be a lot easier to do that. So that next 1,000 rounds after the burn down, a lot of low light, a lot of night vision, and of course more daytime shooting, running on steel, running on paper, stuff like that. Drop testing. Some of you are literally here for that. Of course I was going to do it. Every 500 rounds I'm going to do a shoulder height drop test to basically introduce sudden shock to the optic. It's not because I believe people are going to drop their rifles from that height, although it happens. Every time I hear somebody, or I should say, usually I read the comment. Every time I read, oh, I'd never drop my gun, or I'd never drop my rifle, or whatever, I'm like, yeah, you maybe not yet. But there's two types of people. Those that will, and those that are going to. In my career, interacting with rifles in a myriad of settings of situations, human complacency is right there with human competence. There's a very fine line. So if I put you on a tightrope and get you to walking, eventually you're going to fall off if the tightrope's long enough. And dropping your rifle is it's no big deal. You lean up against something, it falls over. It's happened to all of us, or it will. We just can't maintain that level of precision competence at all times, in all conditions. So an optic should be able to take the inadvertent rough tumble. But also, because it's got duty in the name, I worry about the rigors of law enforcement. I see rifles get banged up really, really bad. Military, almost worse. As far as care of gear goes, just thinking about my time in the Army. But if you're going to set up a goalpost, do you want an optic that can handle it, or do you want an optic that can't? So every 500 rounds, I did that shoulder height drop test. What we're looking for is breakage, of course, but also if it maintains 0 throughout these rigorous drop tests that we're doing, letting gravity do its thing. So I zeroed the rifle for 50 yards. Here is a 5-round group I fired for confirmation of 0 at 50 yards before the review process got started. And here are your drop tests. Ooh, that was a good one. And of course, the moment we're waiting for, did it maintain 0? Didn't experience any breakage, but did it maintain 0? So here is another 5-round group fired at the same 0 distance of 50 yards using the same ammunition to see if it maintains 0. I'd call that 0 maintained, which to be honest, that's what I expected. It's Aimpoint. There's a boring reliability to Aimpoint products, and usually it comes down to, I don't like Aimpoint because it's expensive, or I don't like Aimpoint because of the features, or I don't like Aimpoint because I root for a different team. Whatever. I've always been a big fan of Aimpoint, but I'm also a big fan of other optics, so it just depends on what you want to get into. For this specific optic, for its price point, for its features, I'm glad that, because initially, very briefly, it was only available to law enforcement military, which to me is just like, really guys? Really? It's just not a good look. But I think that they were trying to make sure that those guys got first dibs. I'd like to know who got first dibs on the Acro P2, because those things still aren't very available. But I think now you can just get online and buy it, and hopefully it's in stock. And if you're looking at a T2 and you're kind of scratching your head, maybe you've added it to the cart a few times, just go ahead and grab this. I actually like the features on this optic better than the most recent version of the T2 or the Comp M5. I can't really say there's anything you're going to get from, let's say, a T2 that you're not getting from this optic. And honestly, adjustments are better, both zeroing adjustments and the actual button controls, the brightness setting, the brightness up and down, you know what I'm talking about. I think they're superior to what I'm getting from a T2. So maybe the T2 needs to, and maybe it will, I'm sure it will, update into a newer version, and maybe that one will be cooler than this one, I don't know. But I'm really happy with this optic. I like the body height. I like the overall footprint. Of course, the same footprint as a T2. I like the controls, glass clarity, low light, daylight, night vision. Everything was great. There's obviously going to be some things that people are going to find a complaint about. I really didn't find anything that I don't like about this optic. Well, no, that's not true. I've always felt that the Aimpoint windows could be a little bigger, but it is what it is. I've learned it, you know, over decades of using Aimpoints, I've just kind of learned to accept the fact that this is what I get. But if Aimpoint was going to do something cool in the future, it would be nice for them to bump up the window size just a little bit. Can we get 10% more window? 25% more window would be even cooler. 50% would probably be too much to ask for. But a little bit larger window would probably be the only thing I'd ask for. But as far as features, quality, this is a great optic. I highly recommend it. I'm Eric with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.